Good evening, guys. Hope everyone's doing good. For those of you that maybe joined a couple minutes late, you may have heard from B what the intention of tonight was. And this is important because there's a number of people here, and we have to make sure we do what we promised, which is some people who attended the Peter Crone event, our partnership, which was awesome. I got amazing feedback from everybody on how mind blown they were and how helpful it was. So that's great that we were able to help you with that. Some people did not have their results in time. So tonight, we're going to take some time to support you with the lost Q&A time, meaning that you weren't able to ask personalized questions because you didn't have your results. So some of you here are not in that bucket, meaning that you're joining to hear and follow along, but you did have your results that day and you were able to ask questions. Or maybe you did have your results, so you were able to drive value from all of what we were discussing, but you didn't get to ask questions. So we should prioritize anyone who didn't have their results that day. So what we can do is perhaps anyone here that's joining for the first time with the results who didn't have them that day, perhaps you can raise your hand so we know who you are. And B, will just make sure that we have that ability. If you see right on the bottom where it says share screen Q&A, there's a button to raise hand. It will make sure that we spend time with you first, just to do what we promised. And those of you that had your results that are here for round two, you're welcome. Great to see you again. We'll probably also have time to work on you. So with that all being said, we'll jump right in to make sure that you get the most out of this time. And we'll start with Sherry, who was the first rapid fire to raise up her hand. She had her trigger finger ready to go. So Sherry, you can either type into the Q&A or you can I'm not sure if people can speak, or is it just straight through the Q&A?
We have the Q&A function possible, but I'll just check with Julius that if anybody who wants to ask their question live, that they'll be able to unmute.
Okay.
Or we can unmute them.
Okay. So for now, Sherry, maybe if you don't mind, just type your question into the Q&A box and we'll get going. And even Jan and Sarah, go ahead. And so we'll get to yours right after. And again, anyone else that's here that did not have the results, has them now, go ahead, raise your hand and type your questions into the Q&A box. And we'll see if we can actually get you speaking live. Oh, I see.
I believe Sherry should be able to talk. We've allowed her to talk if she wants to ask her question live, but go ahead with the Q&A chat.
Go ahead, Sherry, you're on the hot seat.
Okay, just actually wondering if you can kind of walk me through a little bit of the what my superpower would be based on my results for the dopamine, etc.
Sure. So do you have your results in front of you?
Yeah, I do.
So what does your dopamine result say?
So the DRD2 is the GG.
DRD2, yeah, sorry. Is GG?
So it's GG.
Okay. And your COMT
is AG.
AG. So you have a higher expression of the dopamine receptor, in fact, the highest possible. And what that means is it's a little too easy for you to bind and experience reward. So that dopamine that we all deploy and create when there's a sense of pleasure or reward, something that you're pursuing satisfaction with, it's very, very easy for you to experience. Okay. And so that speaks to somebody who isn't necessarily chasing or seeking a reward because they constantly get it from everything they're doing. Now, that being said, sorry, to be more specific, the intensity level they receive is high. So the level of satisfaction is high. So that leads to, again, a good and a bad, a power and a kryptonite, however you want to play this and use it.
Yeah.
Your gene is a little quick, meaning it's in this middle space that we call this sort of Zen zone, where it's the ideal clearance, leaning towards slightly quicker, closer to quick than it is to slow, right? But in that middle ground. So the duration for which this pleasure experience lasts is somewhat appropriate. So you're not necessarily overindulging and binging because you get stuck because the clearance is too slow. And so anything that's a while you're just like stuck, and you're also not constantly looking for the next hit because the clearance is too fast. It's like what I got and it was good. And until there's a reason to be triggered again, I will be satisfied.
Okay.
There's no extreme.
Sounds
now,
right.
Yeah, so now what does it speak to? Again, we can look at other neurochemicals to paint a bigger picture, but if we just
Yeah.
isolate the dopaminergic pathway, this reward-seeking pathway, the way you experience the world, it speaks to someone who is more, call us grounded, naysayer, going to move when it's time to move, not necessarily seeking every next hit.
Mhm.
But when they do their work or their food or the whatever, it's high quality. So picture, an accountant who's more entrepreneurial, right? Not the accountant with blinders on sitting there doing the work, but maybe the person leading the team, right? That's more functional. It's able to shift gears because the duration is quick enough where they can move on, not and short enough, or sorry, and long enough where they can actually focus and get things done right in the middle. But they're not necessarily going to be motivated by every next thing. So they can be
Right.
that professional that's dependable, reliable, right? Again, other neurochemicals play into this, but we often see this in sort of leadership roles that are more professional as opposed to an Elon Musk who's a psychopath. And I say that with
Right.
the kindest words I can
Yeah.
be, because I'm in the same psychopath bucket, right? So that's what it kind of speaks to. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
And any other layers to the mood pathway that you think need clarity?
Yeah. So then when I go to the serotonin, it's the LS, which
Yeah.
is dysregulated, correct?
Yeah. So dysregulated at a functional level. So there's LL, which is these beautiful long receptors, which give me a lot of serotonin, which means I'm kind of overly overly grounded. I
Yeah.
don't respond enough. And then there's the SS, which is so short in terms of receptor that I hardly get any serotonin. So my brain is constantly prompted by every next thing. So yours is
Right.
more this, again, um, functional lack of serotonin response, which
Right.
allows me to be slightly more detail oriented, slightly more concerned, slightly more interested, also slightly more sort of variable in your mood, right? So you
Yeah.
can respond and get triggered, and it's a healthy place to be because you're alive and you're not, stone cold, right? So
Yeah.
it's this functional space. So if you combine that with your dopamine pathway, it speaks even more to what I was just suggesting, this sort of
Okay.
professional leadership,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. So, okay, so if a person has experienced, depression with that,
Yeah,
coding,
yeah.
where would you go from there? Like, are you like,
So
you
there's more
know,
to look at. So now there's two answers. I'm going to tell you something just from what we've discussed, but I'm also going to tell you that when it comes to something like depression, where you've actually experienced it, that's exactly where the coaching that we offer will be really valuable, because when it
okay,
comes to a word like depression, it's not a straight path to get there, right?
right?
It's not like here's a switch that we turn on, the depression switch. That's where
Yeah.
sort of mental health is misunderstood. It's a connection of the gut, the mind, your detox pathways, your
Okay.
hormone, right? Everything needs to be considered to really solve the problem. Um, Now, having said that, just looking at this piece of the puzzle, there's this sort of call it acute anxiety response when you lose what you normally expect, because it's so hard. You're normally up here, intense,
Mhm.
satisfied, everything's good, always satisfied, right? When it's removed and taken away, picture something like your favorite restaurant closed down or the trip got canceled, right?
Yeah.
Big crash. Because your brain is not used to the bottom where there's zero pleasure, you're void of satisfaction. It's constantly receiving satisfaction. So it's not this chronic, ongoing, everyday, the life, my world sucks. It's more like, and now the question is, what's going on? What's your scenario? What's
Yeah.
your context? Who are you amongst? What's going on with your kids, your family, or all this stuff? And these are the triggers that lead to it. So short answer is that's what I see, that this like acute take the good away from me crash. And if that happens too often, it feels like depression, right? The bigger picture is to really fix the problem, you need to look at every system. And that is
Okay.
weeks. That's weeks of work. But the good news is, as opposed to here's a pill that you take the rest of your life, it's let's
Yeah.
work on this for a few weeks and it's gone. We fixed it.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So there you go.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. Jan, go ahead. We'll get Jan's mic going.
Okay,
She also dropped a portion of her question into the Q&A
Okay.
just to supplement if she wants to talk live as well.
Let's see. So this is Jan. I have TPH.
Yep.
So the BDNF gene regulates neuroplasticity. So your brain's ability to develop neural pathways, right? Thinking, mood, meaning. These are some of the triggers that are driven by variable BDNF levels. There's this phenomenon called epistasis, where you have a gene that's coded to do a job at a certain level, and we know that's studied and published to be true. Then there's another gene that comes along and interferes and turns the dial on that gene. And this is not epigenetics. Epigenetics is your environment, nutrition, and lifestyle temporarily turning the dial so long as that input is there. So long as I'm eating broccoli, I'm doing something to my hormones. And the day I stop eating broccoli, I go back to my foundation, right? Epistasis is you're permanently changing this gene because you have another gene in your body that's not going anywhere. It's part of your code. So what's going on is you have the great version of BDNF, GG, which means that your mood should be somewhat more elevated, able to handle more of a burden, plow through problems, very little meaning to things. Let me just take care of it, right? Then TPH comes along and turns that off. And it doesn't turn it off in all of what BDNF does. We find, and this is a unique insight to us because we sat and talked to so many people. So this is very hard information to find academically. It's not trained at Harvard or some genetic school. This is what we know because we've actually met thousands of patients and realized this is a trend. When we see this, it's always like this. And what do we see? That in terms of the actual hardware, the neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to develop neural pathways and learn, create tunnels to learn new information, that still doesn't seem to be affected. The mood is what is affected. And what does that mean? You have the good BDNF, which gives you the good hardware, less chance of cognitive decline, learn new skills easily, shift gears. But when it comes to your mood, you may give things a little bit too much meaning. And so a phone call with you isn't, here's the next thing. It's like, we got to take care of this. It's horrible. It's either too good or too bad. There's nothing in the middle, right? So we refer to it some as shell shock. The news you're receiving, whether it's good or bad, is always impactful. It's not PTSD. PTSD is how you remember. Shell shock is in the moment, making my brain spin. I can't sleep at night because I can't stop thinking about this letter that I received and I wish this never happened. Versus, yeah, got the letter, but I'm busy with something else. I'll deal with it tomorrow, right? So that's where we see the impact is in terms of mood. The meaning, shell shock, hamster wheel spinning continues, but the neuroplasticity seems to be okay. Right. And that's what that epistatic phenomenon is doing.
Are there certain tools that I could employ in order to I guess, not have it intensify?
Yeah. So first of all, does it feel like that to you?
Sometimes, I mean, there's definitely moments, but I have been active my whole life. So I exercise, I do all the right thing, I eat well, and I've been able to put Band-Aids on it to be able to keep going.
So the number one tool probably is exercise.
Yeah.
It's funny that the best depression drug, and this goes back to Sherry also, is noted to work 40% of the time. So 60% of the time, the best antidepressant drug on the market fails 60% of the time. Exercise works twice as well as that. And this was just published this year. We've always known this, but science never wanted to prove it because there's no profit in that, right? So it's now 80% efficacy when it comes to exercise, 40% with the best mental health drug. Now, why do I say this? Because 50%, this is for everybody listening, 50% of your nervous system is in your legs. So long as you are moving your big muscles, which, lower half, and your big, back and bench presses type thing, you're signaling to your brain the need to catch up and stay young and youthful. And it just doesn't have time for mood issues. It's so busy with creating other hormones and creating neuroplasticity and catching up with recovery and repair. You're truly in a different state. The miracle of the body, it will give you what you demand of it. So if you demand youthfulness, energy, the best solution for I have no energy is to start exercising, and all of a sudden you'll have energy. Because your mitochondria starts firing and burning ATP, this fuel, this battery you have, and giving it to you. You have it. We have plenty. But sit on a couch, your body's going to say, I'll give you that. I'll give you the relaxation you're seeking, right? You'll sort of lean into whatever you're doing. So why do I say this? Exercise is key. It drives neuroplasticity, but low intensity, yoga, stretching, walking, long duration, low intensity, heavy weightlifting, sauna. Sauna is a major upregulator of BDNF. There's a supplement, the ingredients is whole fruit coffee extract. On the DNA company website, you'll see it listed as BDNF optimizer. So we actually went and found the best whole fruit coffee extract we could. Bryce from our team literally travels the globe to go to the actual facilities where the ingredients are and audits them. And he found this incredible whole fruit coffee extract, which is available on the website for this specific purpose, BDNF upregulator. The other thing I would say is urolithin A, that your brain has a really high density of mitochondria. Again, this is for everybody. We are living longer, right? We are living into our 70s and 80s, but we haven't been taught how to maintain our brains until that age. And that's why you're seeing so much more Alzheimer's and dementia, not because people are susceptible to it, but because the environmental, food, and lifestyle factors that create neural inflammation, plus the amount of years our brain is exposed equals Alzheimer's, right? So you have to support mitochondria in the brain. You have of the locations in your body where we have high density of mitochondria, your brain is number 2, the highest density of mitochondria in your body. And so by supporting mitochondria, you're supporting the youthfulness and mood and weight of whatever's going on in the world in terms of your brain receiving it. So those are some sweeping things that everybody here should be doing. That's why I spent a little bit extra time on it. It's not just for Jan, it's for everybody, because we do need to keep our brains young.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. So Sarah, another hand.
And Sarah
Yeah.
also dropped a lot of the details into the Q&A as well, just like
Okay.
that. Thank you.
Oh, and am I unmuted?
No, we hear you now, Sarah.
Okay,
How you doing?
good, thanks.
You're good. Okay, so you did drop some things in here, but you're welcome to chat. I'll keep reading it. Yeah.
Yeah, so all my entire life, people have looked at me and told me, oh, you're estrogen dominant. And I've had every symptom you can have for estrogen dominance. Then turns out, no, I'm not, I'm androgen dominant. But I'm thinking that it must just be estrogen toxicity, because I know that I make enough testosterone, but then like that dial's way open, it all empties out. Then it becomes estrogen, not some good types. And then I have poor detoxification. That's what I see. Like I worked through that little chart, hormone chart that you sent out. And I've also been listening to a lot of your podcasts. Is that possible?
Yeah, so there's a couple things to look at. One is, for the first time ever, the medical community is changing the age at which we think girls are supposed to go into puberty. It used to be, and I'm not too accurate on this because we don't deal with many people that age, but I think 12, 13, 14 was the norm. Now it's like 10. And it's not unheard of to see an 8 or 9-year-old girl getting her first period now. And why am I saying that and how is it relevant to you? Because there's your foundation. The thing that I said when we started this call, there's your genetics, and then there's your epigenetics, the environment, nutrition, lifestyle factors that turn the dials on your genes, exactly what you just said. And you can be androgen dominant today and live in an environment that is constantly turning the dials on your estrogen metabolism, equaling the symptoms of estrogen dominance, right? So what do you need to consider? First of all, do you have your report in front of you?
Yes.
So
I
look
have
up the Andro X ANRDO
Yeah, and it's CT.
CT. So there's another challenge you have. So you're androgen dominant. So remember, there's 3 steps of the hormone cascade. What do you make? What quality is it? And how do you get rid of it? But in between, there's another layer which we don't talk about often, because not many people have a problem here. You're one of those unique people which may actually answer all of what you just asked. Your androgen receptor is inefficient. So you make progesterone, you convert it into testosterone, but it's very difficult for you to utilize that testosterone because your receptors don't work. And so what happens next? Sorry?
Oh, I was going to say, I've been on and off different hormones for various reasons, including testosterone for migraines at one point, and it made me feel fantastic to
Yeah.
have that extra testosterone.
So this is what's happening is your foundation is your genes are androgen dominant in terms of what you make, but you have this challenge in actually utilizing it and binding it. And then what happens? You have all this extra free-flowing testosterone, which again, things in your blood don't mean much. What did it do to the cell? What did it do to the vasculature? Like, what did it actually trigger? So testosterone in the blood, not useful until you bound it and used it, and it signals something as a hormone. So you don't bind it and use it because your receptor is not that great. It's now free flowing and available to convert into estrogen, which is, you know, that's your last step of the pathway, and there's just too much testosterone left over. So there's a couple things you can do. There's now hormones, and everyone here has heard me say this before, and I said this on our group call, that hormones are the one area, especially with women, that I would highly recommend working with somebody, because it's so finicky and so unique. Even though we have things mapped out genetically, we still learn every time we meet somebody new.
I've already signed up.
So you're signed up, so you're working with somebody, so that's good. So the focus, just so you go into this, you know, with the right outcome, we need to activate your androgen receptor, and I'll give you a couple of easy things, but your coach is going to help you with this. Stretching, so this is why stretching prior to exercise is more important than just preventing injury. It actually literally activates, especially the big muscles, the glutes, the thighs, the hamstrings. When you stretch them, you activate all your androgen receptors and you bind a lot more testosterone. This is why if you look at a lifetime yogi, you know, picture the person that, you know, moved to India and became a yogi in a temple, they're usually very thin and wiry. Right?
See, and I taught yoga for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew it was good for me. It felt great.
Yeah. And so did your body change after you stopped that?
Well, right around the same time that I still do yoga probably 3 times a week, but I also started going into menopause and everything just went really sideways.
Yeah. So you'll probably need some hormone support. It sounds like you've already dabbled in that, but we'll personalize it from a genetic lens. But so there's a couple things to slow down the estrogen metabolism. That's one layer, which I work through in your coaching. Second thing is to activate the androgen receptor to utilize it and give you that muscle. And like you said, lack of headaches and better sleep and all this stuff. Let's utilize it. Let's slow down the metabolism. And then we'll create this sort of homeostasis. And what's driving all this problematic stuff? Yes, the receptor, but it's also the overly burdensome estrogen mimic life that we now live, right? So everything you eat, breathe, smell, touch, including your clothing, is mimicking estrogens and sort of exaggerating the way you feel. So
and I know that, and I'm going to ask one more question, which is not very scientific. I have a moderate paranoia of going off all of my hormones and then having terrible hot flashes and night sweats and not being able to sleep again. In your experience, if I get all these dials figured out, will I be able to sleep?
So I think hormones are probably going to be part of the equation, because you are going through menopause as a shift and you're losing what you used to have. That's menopause is actually very protective. Women need to go through menopause, because what happens is you lose. Up until then, the body's assuming that you needed fertility.
Yes.
Part and parcel of fertility is estrogen toxicity.
Yes.
And so the body says, we don't need fertility anymore. Let's stop doing this nonsense because we don't want to hurt ourselves, right?
Yes.
Now, all of a sudden you slow down hormone pathways, which affects your brain, your heart, it affects other things where you actually need estrogen. So there's a fine balance which will be driven by your genomic map. It's not a take this and go. It's like, let's tweak it based on what your genetics are speaking to us and what it's saying. And so you're going to go through that now. You're going to, you know, Tracy's who's listening in is our CEO. And I was just talking to her today about another client who was taking hormones at some doctor somewhere, and he feels horrible because it wasn't personalized to him, right? Shifting over to get things done through Tracy's clinical team. So you're going to experience that also. So you probably likely will still need the hormones, but what we're saying is that this foundational, like, let's get you back to who you really are, right? We need to educate you on what threats are, remove them. We need to support you with the right supplements and foods, etc., to get dials
And
back.
will I also have access to suggestions from you guys to take to my healthcare practitioner about what types and amounts of hormones I should be on?
So one of two things, either that, or we might even be able to administer it for you.
Okay,
So yeah, we have clinicians in-house that can just handle it because they understand the genetics and the hormones, right?
great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem.
Perfect.
Okay.
Cash, we have somebody named Peter Fry in the Q&A who it looks like he's on a bit of a time crunch, but would love the opportunity to talk to you. So if we can address him next, that would be great.
Hey, Peter, let's jump on.
Hi, Cash.
Hey, Peter, how you doing?
I'm fine. Yeah, great. Thanks very much for seeing me probably sooner than I should be. I was on the webinar with you and Peter last time, so I don't want to feel like I'm jumping the queue too much. But obviously being in the UK, and I was very I took a lot of focus on what you were saying regarding understanding you from the mood and behaviour.
Right.
So, and being 60, you know, I've got a lot of a life to sort of look back on and think, Christ, yeah, that's what's been happening in my life. You know, very interesting. And I think if I just read that out to you, what it is, that gives you a little bit of where I'm at. So my COMT is AG.
Yeah.
My D2 is AG.
Yeah.
My ADRA2B is LL or II.
Yeah.
My serotonin, the 5-HTTP is LL, and the
Right.
BDNF is GG.
That's, you know, one of the, let's say, healthiest mood and behavior profiles I've ever seen.
Well, that sounds great.
Very, very unusual.
Yeah. I mean,
Very
the only
unusual.
thing I would say with it is I have also got the TPH2 GG as well, which actually what you were saying about putting a bit of weight on things at times, I find that to be true as well. I mean, I've got a company, I'm a director, you know, a lot of people, I am the approachable one. Everyone comes to me, I listen, I'm a good listener. And that's how I see myself. So that sort of puts a sort of a view of where I'm at in your head. But one of the things that sort of came back in my report that really, because I think really longevity is the sort of my main thing, and being 60 and having had a seizure about 18 months ago, I sort of really changed my life around a bit. I probably played a bit hard over my life, and the things that were sticking out for me was my inability to clear toxins. The report says, yes, I'll have lines on my face, and I've had quite a baby face most of my life, but in the last sort of 10 years, those lines have come out. But that's probably years of abuse, if I'm pretty honest with you, you know. And also really my ability for blood sugar response. I did do via a Tim Spector thing. I wore a continuous glucose monitor. I did a gut health thing. And both of those came back very poor. My blood sugar response when I wore the glucose monitor, I think I only had to look at a potato and I was off the scale. And if I look back at my life, my diet, although I didn't think it was unhealthy, you know, I was having cornflakes for breakfast, bars of chocolate through the day, always eating potato and rice, and going to bed with a bowl of cereals as well, and probably having 1, 2, 3 spoonfuls of sugar in about a dozen cups of English tea a day, you know. So I probably went up in the morning and came down in the evening before bed, you know. And I used to crash out all day long, you know, 1 minute I'm up, next minute I'm half asleep, then I'm up. And I was just wondering, and the other thing is my gut response. When I did the gut microbiome test, my gut microbiomes was very, very poor, but I've changed my diet and I'm eating all the kimchi, the sauerkraut. They're trying to get my gut microbiome sorted out. And I did do a retest and it has gone up by 25%. But out of 100, it's still only 20. And I know age is not on my side. And I was just wondering how this toxin thing and that blood sugar response, is there some sort of connection between the two that maybe stopping my gut microbiome from getting better?
Well, out of all what you just said, before your question came out, the thing that I was thinking is the most important thing to fix is your gut. And it's not the microbiome itself. I think it's probably the gut lining. So if you've been eating sugary foods, like you said, for 60 years or however many years, right?
Yeah, well, it is pretty much that.
Yeah. So it's not just the microbiome itself, but the actual hardware of the gut. So the actual gut lining and infrastructure there is probably highly disrupted and probably has some permeability in what we call leaky gut. And so it's hard to reset the gut until you also fix that. And that's what often gets ignored. So there's certain bacterial strains that will help you with that. There's a couple things. Digestive enzymes to take the load off of your gut as you're eating your meals for the next 6 months or so. So get some digestive enzymes. They're pretty common if you go to a health food store or pharmacy and have them for the next 6 months so that your gut is suffering less in terms of the metabolic process of eating. There's a product from a company called BioOptimizers, and the product is called Microbiome Breakthrough. Or, I'm sorry, it's called Biome Breakthrough. And it very specifically rebuilds the gut lining. That's what it is. I haven't seen too many products that do this, but it's formulated just for that purpose.
I see.
Again, I would think you would need that for a good 6 months. You know, and then I think you take it on an empty stomach in the morning, and it really supports the rebuilding of the gut lining. Then it'll be a lot easier to reset your gut. Now, having said that, we said about the sugar and the detox. So what your cells are designed to handle a certain threshold of pain, but when you have multiple fronts, not only am I dealing with toxins, not only am I dealing with bad food, but my metabolism of starches and sugars is suboptimal because of my genes. So that's a metabolic dysfunction, including, so there's inflammation from the toxins and there's metabolic dysfunction from the food. And the cells have to deal with both. So it means that it's harder to recover. There's more damage being done than just the one, not isolated or siloed. They combine and accumulatively cause problems. So I would just say recover. And now the other thing is you're 60, so you've lost some mitochondria. As you age, your mitochondria depletes. By the time you're 70, you've lost 70% of your mitochondria. So the cell's resilience is powered by mitochondria. And so again, it's harder to bounce back. So the answers for you are not the same as the 32-year-old man that research is done on, right? No. And it's like, well, he bounced back in 4 months. What's wrong with you? Well, you're 60 and your mitochondria is different and your gut is much further along that path. So your check marks of success look different. So those products I said about, enzymes while you eat, repair your gut microbiome lining. Yes, of course, you have to avoid the sugars and starches. They will populate the wrong microbiome flora. Not only do they affect your metabolic health, but when you eat sugar, you're actually feeding a certain flora of bacteria in your gut that starts to flourish, and the good bacteria you want dies because it's not being fed. And the funny thing is that bacteria that you're feeding, the excrement, the poop of that bacteria is really toxic. The human body wasn't designed to deal with it. And we find that we heal women of fibromyalgia by fixing their gut, because there was the toxic poop from the gut microbiome that was causing the fibromyalgia. It's not the fibromyalgia itself. So just know that it's very important to eliminate sugars or add, berberine, which is a metabolizer of sugars to your meals for the insulin response. So it's a combination of all those things. Last thing,
Yeah.
I'll support mitochondria, sauna. We've talked about this a few times. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you do for fitness, but lift some weights.
Yeah, I
Irrespective
mean
of age.
that's I must admit, I mean I have my moments on lifting weights. I'm a sort of a bit of an all or nothing sort of guy,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Unless it excites me, and I think that's in my, in that top mood and behavior. Unless I get some excitement, I get bored too quick.
Yeah,
I have
it's
to
hard
have
for you
that
to get excited
excitement
because
going on.
your dopamine pathway is so zen, you don't need
Yeah.
it. So just
Yeah.
what you need is structure. So give yourself structure, which is routine, and check mark the routine is done. The process itself is not enough for you. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I've flipped the diet. I mean, the diet, I'm very, very Mediterranean. I've cut out rice, I've cut out pasta, I've not complete potatoes because I'm English, but I mean, by and large, I've cut them out. I don't
Yeah.
really have sugar in tea and coffee and that sort of stuff. So I'm heavily in that direction.
Yeah.
But obviously, I was looking for results quicker, and I just wanted, when I
No,
had the
it won't.
retest,
Give it
I
time.
just saw it was slow, and when this came through, because my GSTM1, I'm 0 on that one.
Yeah, so that's your gut again. So yes, it does take time. It's going to take, like I said, just this gut healing process is going to take 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Just that one thing alone, and then your gut microbiome is going to start flourishing after that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
true healing, you 60 years of damage, you got to give it a good year to fix it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but the good news is you're no longer using a band-aid. You've actually fixed the problem.
Yeah, yeah, and that's and I sort of thank your system for putting me on that right track. Obviously, Peter Crone about 18 months ago sorted my head out, and this I feel is like the last little slot
Yeah, last
that's
bit
putting
you
me
do.
on the road. And being an engineer, this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So,
Sounds
anyway, that's great.
all right.
Kat. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure. Shafi. Shafi, I think your mic's on there.
Hey Cash, how are you?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I got out of bed today.
Oh, good.
So I had a quick question for you. Hope I'm not gonna take too long. I can't access my report, but I do remember the question I wanted to ask was in regards to vitamin D and how I'm processing it. And the report recommended something along the lines of pre-activated vitamin D. And I scoured Amazon for looking for that particular pre-activated vitamin D, but I couldn't find anything along the lines of that. So I was just wondering if you had any
Okay.
recommendations.
Yeah, so simple answer. Sorry, we overcomplicated things for you. What it's saying really, and we'll change this on our end. Let's make a note, team, that we should change this. It's really what we're saying is take D3 instead of D2. So there's a lot of vitamin D supplements out there that are D2 because that's what you get from the sun. And so formulators think, let's give you what you get from the sun. But what we're also saying is that your genetics make it difficult for you to convert D2 into D3, which is the active version. So just take D3. And there's animal versions that come from lanolin from like sheep wool. There's plant versions that come from algae. There's lots of different types, but just make sure it says D3. The other consideration is if you're taking high doses to add K2, because the outcome of overdosing or even high dosing D3 is calcification, calcium buildup, and K2 mitigates that. So look for ideally liquid D3 with a K2 already in it, and that should be easy to find.
Got it. Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I'm already taking D3 then.
Okay.
Yeah, that was all. Thank you. Appreciate
No problem.
help. Thank you.
All right. Lorella.
Hello, hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. I missed other call, so I'm glad I have this opportunity.
Oh, great.
Yeah, my question is around hormones.
Okay.
And So my report said estrogen dominant, yet it did said that the CYP17A1 was AG, so it was androgenic. But then I have the suboptimal CYP1B1, which is the CG.
Right.
And so I have a question about, because I mean, you know, I'm thinking about perimenopause period.
Yeah.
And so I'm taking the maca supplement. What do you think about that? I mean, could it be not advisable since this report is saying that I'm an estrogen dominant, or do you think it's okay?
What is your CYP 19A1? You said the 17A1 was AG, right?
Wait, so the CP, can you ask again? CP?
19A1.
19A1 is CT.
CT. Okay. That's why. So you're making a lot of testosterone, but then you're converting it into estrogen. So a lot of the green type, let's say teas, plant superfoods, are not really about the hormones themselves, but they're potent antioxidants to clear the toxic byproducts. So there's some confusion because in medicine and even in functional medicine, the story ends at estrogen dominance, right? Oh, you're estrogen dominant, that's a problem, which is true. The women that have problems are estrogen dominant, certain sets of problems, which we can get into more detail about, but not all of them have problems. What's missing from that equation is only the women that are estrogen dominant and estrogen toxic end up with these inflammatory issues, right? It's just that you need that extra estrogen to be toxic. But we end the conversation on estrogen dominant. So why am I saying all this? Because there's also a lot of benefits to estrogen, especially as you're going into perimenopause and levels fall off a cliff, and that's what creates this roller coaster that women are trying to avoid. So it may not be the best time to slow estrogens down. So the maca and things like green tea with EGCG do a good job of antioxidation, which is clearing your fast CYP1B1, which is making the 4-hydroxyestrogen, right? So if you prioritize that, you're actually doing the right thing. In fact, I would even add other stuff there. You can add, if you support your glutathione pathway, if you support mitochondrial function, your antioxidant pathway, but antioxidants in general, including maca and other green type stuff, really support the CYP1B1 pathway. So you're doing the right thing, in my opinion.
Okay, so, but am I estrogen dominant or the androgynous
Yeah. So the reason
doesn't mean anything because I'm not utilizing it, right?
Yeah, the reason why the algorithm is calling you estrogen dominant, even though you're making a lot of androgens, is because it doesn't stop at androgens. So women and this is where there's a nuance of the outcome in a man would have been good, but for a woman it's not good because your body, even though CYP19A1 is CT, your CT means something different than what it means for a man. It's still a lot slower for a man. That's why he's a man, because he doesn't have the estrogen to drive female sex hormones and female reproductive organs, right? So you're making too much of the initial pool of hormones, and then you're bleeding it all into estrogen. So that equals estrogen dominance. So they're not compartmentalized as two separate things. It's more of a flow, right? Continuous baton pass.
And then also the andro is CT, right? So that's also is bleeding out. It's not really
your andro, so your binder, so you have the same problem as earlier, which surprising to hear two people on the same night saying the same thing, because it's an unusual thing that we don't see often.
Is it?
Yeah. So you're also in the same bucket where you're not even utilizing the androgen efficiently. So again, stretching, heavy weightlifting, even just mentally being more in a warrior state and less in a worrier state. If I were to use a simple word to describe testosterone and estrogen, testosterone is warrior, estrogen is warrior. They both have their benefits and problems. If you just lean into something and give yourself challenges and start working towards something, you'll become more androgenized because your body will give you what you ask for. If you lean back, you know, and be a homebody and sort of take a break, and you'll become more estrogenized.
I
Your
look,
body, yeah.
you know, I look very thin and tall, like I don't look like very curvy, like androgenic.
Okay. Okay. So
but
again, lifestyle food is, so your
yeah,
foundation is, call it middle ground, right?
mhm.
But it's very easy to teeter in either direction depending what your inputs are, epigenetics, food, etc. Because there's all this excessive making of things and then a weak receptor in the middle, so you can very easily go in either direction.
And so would the TMJ and the SMAE be beneficial for this genetic profile for me?
So those support clearing toxic estrogens, and yes, oh sorry, by speeding up COMT. So what is your COMT gene, which is, it's in a different section, it's in the mood.
Yeah, the comp is good. The comp gene is AG, so it's the ideal.
Yeah, so I don't think you need the SAMI and TMG unless you're having inflammatory issues, like unless like, or you live near a factory where there's a lot of estrogen mimics, or you know, you're on birth control pill. And so if you think your lifestyle is clean and you're eating the right foods and you're staying away from chemicals and hormone disruptors, you don't really need the SAMI and TMG. It speeds up your comp, but speeding up your comp also changes your mood and it changes other things. So, you know, don't do it unless you need to.
So what about having the SOD2 TT? Doesn't
Mitochondrial function, which is why you need antioxidants. I shouldn't say, but even more so speaks to why you need antioxidants.
is it also the methylation that kind of like loops into this, or what do you
Yeah,
mean?
there's three buckets that clear your hormones. It's glutathione, antioxidation, and methylation, but COMT is a primary driver of that. So your antioxidation seems like it definitely needs support. So you can support mitochondrial function itself with all of the things we said already, like sauna, urolithin A, tocotrienols. It's a form of vitamin E. We make that actually. Weightlifting, you know, drivers of mitochondrial function. Or you can support antioxidation, which is the job that your mitochondria is supposed to do, through antioxidants like anthocyanin, blueberries. If you were to eat a cup of blueberries every day, it would probably change your life, like truly, right? But clean, wild, you know, organic blueberries, they have a really high level of anthocyanin. Purple Japanese sweet potatoes have a really high level of anthocyanin. These are foods you might want to incorporate, antioxidant type foods.
Interesting. What do you think about the methylene blue? Are you a fan of that
Awesome.
one or no?
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. If you can get it, use it. It would benefit you.
And that it's helpful for what? For the methylation, or for the, what does the methylene blue do? Is it for the
It's
mitochondrial?
somewhat it's supporting cellular health. So we know that your mitochondria is not the best. So the cells are probably struggling. Methylene blue will come in and help with all of that, right? So we can get into the science of the exact mechanism, but let's say the outcome is there's less of a load on your cells, and so your cells can thrive, which they probably aren't because of your TT SAW2.
And same with the nitric oxide that
Nitric
also,
oxide just improves blood flow, which means better delivery of nutrients, right? So the food and everything that you think you're getting, are you actually delivering it to the cell? You know, is your vasculature young and healthy, or is it constricted? That's nitric oxide. And I think everybody could use more nitric oxide because our food doesn't give us what it used to.
Okay, so that's also good. Yeah, no, I think that there was a gene that gives you more the thermal thing. The thermal
Yeah,
is
UCP1, thermal regulation. I don't think it's in the report. That's one of the things that we look at in the programs.
I think it was the UCP1. I have the AG.
Oh, so you see it in there? Okay. So
So
even
it's
your metabolic rate,
suboptimal.
it's yeah, so your metabolic rate is a little off, thermal regulation is a little off. So that just speaks to metabolic rate being a little slower.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank
No
you.
problem. Peter.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, it's Martin and Peter. It's my
Hey.
friend Peter. Okay, so I wrote my question in a Q&A,
Okay.
but I can well, I can ask you whatever you prefer.
Oh, I don't even see it, so go ahead.
Okay, so I've been struggling with many health issues during my life. I'm 42. I had the SIBO infection, parasite infections. I have mercury and lead toxicity. I have lots of brain fog, joint pain. I have a leaky gut. Well, and now I know that I also had a lot of injuries like fibrocartilage tears and surgeries and stuff. And I heal very slow from injuries. So, and now I know that I have a very bad genetic detox profile.
Mhm.
So I've been trying to take supplements and stuff for, well, first treat my infections and my, well, the mercury. I'm trying to do a chelation for the mercury and lead toxicity. But yeah, with my detox profile, I don't have the GSTT1 gene. So you said that I cannot take glutathione because I will
Right.
not. So where to start?
And how old are you now?
42.
42. Okay. So first of all, what you described, SIBO, parasites, all these issues, it's not that you're having a worse time than everybody else. You are describing the average American. It's just most people don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You made the effort to go check and test and learn what's going on. This
Because I
is
was suffering from a lot of
because you were
symptoms of
suffering.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people just keep going through it and they get diagnosed with some kind of condition and they're taking a pill for that. Right. And your intuition pointed to, I think there's something going wrong here. I don't feel right. And so you
Yep.
investigate it. So heavy metal toxicity, SIBO, parasites, gut issues, brain fog. This is the average American today and more.
I'm
Far more
Canadian.
right?
But still.
So yeah, it's our environment has drastically changed in the last 50 years. So since the 1970s, the proliferation of chemical usage, what's now spilling over into the water. So every time you see somebody at the car wash and it goes in the drain, those are forever chemicals that don't break down. You now have 30% of American tap water has forever chemicals in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Literally 31 in 3 people is drinking forever chemicals on a daily basis. You know, so why am I saying this is because don't feel like what's wrong with me, even though there's a broken glutathione pathway, even though, you know, it's more like I just did the work and I figured it out, right? Everybody feels like this. They just have different diseases to call it because the disease is the last thing to kick in once you've been sitting in this state for too long. So that all being said, yes, with your broken GSTT1 pathway, that's a priority. And so you need more precursors. You can get to the point where you can use glutathione, but you have to build your way up. You have to think of yourself as first day in the gym. You're not deadlifting 400 pounds. You're going to grab a bar and that's it, right? And what is a bar in detox? It's NAC, N-acetylcysteine, it's called NAC.
Yeah.
Selenium, which for women is very important. For the thyroid, in fact, it's really supportive for thyroid health. Alpha lipoic acid, ALA, as it's commonly described. So these are precursors. And if you take NAC and you blend it with something called glycine and you take them together, potent combination for detox without the burden of glutathione with your particular genetics, right? So that's an important place to start. Now, healing the gut is another big important place to start. And you often have to get rid of the parasites and the other cofactors before you'll heal. And before you can get rid of the parasites and the other cofactors, you have to open up your detox pathways. This means you have to be pooping phenomenally and you have to be sweating and you have to be peeing all the day, right? So once those pathways are open, then you can, have you done anything about the parasites?
Yeah. I think SIBO and parasites are probably gone now. It's the heavy metal. It's more the I'm now towards the chelation and the metal detoxification.
Yeah, heavy metal issue. When did you find out about that?
It's been almost a year now that I'm
here. And did you just recently start to feel the effects of it, or is it just something you've been feeling bad for a while, but you just found out it was heavy metals?
I've been feeling bad for years, but mostly since everything got super worse since COVID vaccines. Like I've started like joint pains everywhere, like arthritic. It kind of triggered the autoimmune response, and everything. The SIBO was diagnosed after that, and my health is it's very hard to, like, brain fogs are very bad since the vaccine.
Okay. Well, it's good that you told me that, because that's a whole other problem to solve. So it's not the genetics, step one, right? Who am I? Step two is epigenetics. What did I do? What did I eat? What did I smell? What did I breathe? Who did I talk to? Where am I? These are the things that pair with your genetics to equal your outcome. And yeah, the vaccination is a major burden for some people. And in your case, no GSTT pathway, there's certain things that needed to be detoxified from that injection that your body didn't detoxify. What is your SOD2 pathway, SOD2?
DC. It's good, I think.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Good's a strong word, you know? So that's the second thing. And what is your 9p21 in the cardiovascular section?
It's 4.
4G. Okay. So what you need to think about, and you probably need support here, because it's not a simple, hey, take this pill and you'll be fine, right? It's detoxifying certain, like, what's making you feel this way? Inflammation. What's causing inflammation? Toxins. We do now know a lot more than we used to, and there are ways to detoxify this stuff. It takes a while. Dr. Burkle on our team has an amazing protocol for the detox of this stuff. He's a functional medicine doctor. He's actually a chief medical officer. So I would highly recommend you do that. This means clinical work. It means a few months of detox protocol that's nuanced and tweaked. So it's not one single thing that you have to do. It's multiple things that are tweaked and changed over time. Methylene blue, which somebody mentioned, is one of the things. Natokinase, bromelain, there's different things you have to go through to clean this up. Because if you don't clean that up, it's like the terrain isn't ready for the healing you're seeking. So if you have a constant irritable sort of component to your system, you can't heal because the threat is still there. So yeah, in your case, again, I would highly recommend you talk to somebody in our team about what that looks like clinically. And in fact, in the chat, there's a couple of email addresses you can look at. Now, in general terms, we said NAC glycine, so heavily support the mitochondria. All of the things we've been saying today about mitochondria, urolithin A, tocotrienols, sauna, weightlifting. Excuse me, we didn't talk yet about breath holding. So what we call hormetic stresses, holding your breath, pushing your body physically, healthy stresses, supports mitochondrial function and mitophagy, development of new mitochondria. So that's another big one for you, because in order to feel well, you have to recover the mitochondria. And going back, one last thing, the reason why I was asking you about the heavy metals and when you felt the way you did and when it all started, etc., is that as women get into menopause, and you're now 42, so you very likely could be experiencing perimenopause. It's harder to put your finger on, but you could be there. Hormone levels come down, and so you start to lose bone density. Women and men both store heavy metals in their bones. That's your body's way of protecting you. So if you start to lose density, those stored heavy metals start to leach back into the bloodstream. And why is this important? Because again, medically, what do? We test what's in the blood and we make a diagnosis, we treat it. But what's in the blood doesn't necessarily mean that you deal with it today and it's gone. Because if your bone is still leaching it back into the bloodstream, there's a constant tap that's on, right? So you also need to deal with bone health, which means vitamin D and estrogens and hormones. So even more so, points me in the direction of you need clinical support. I can give you the answers, But why do I say some people need clinical support and some don't? The monitoring, the tweaking and turning of the dials. It isn't go take the supplement and you'll feel better, which I have said to some people about certain things. In your case, it's like you're going to do a little bit of work here, and then you have to shift gears here, and you have to shift gears here, and there's 3 or 4 different things. And then sometimes you have to turn it down, speed it up. That requires a clinical oversight. And a regular MD doesn't even know where to start. You need a functional medicine doctor. So I would contact, you see Brandon Hubbard in the chat here. Talk to him because he knows that side of things well. I would highly recommend it. This is something that can linger for a couple of decades or could be gone in a year, you know, depending how you approach it.
Okay. It's already been years, but yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
My boyfriend had a question. His name is Peter, is right beside me. Can I ask
sure.
for him? It could be very quick. He has a ankylosing spondylitis.
Okay.
Well, is there a gene that we didn't have access to that could?
Yeah, so when it comes to genetic conditions, that's the one thing that we don't do, right? So what we do is we look at the functional pathways.
Okay.
And so that's a perfect example of one of the things we don't work on. So there are genetic tests that are whole genome sequencing that look for genetic markers that point to genetic conditions. And that's not what we do. And but what we do, they don't do. Right? Completely different algorithm. It's just the nature of how you have to interact with the equipment. You can't get everything. You have to, the way we test, we actually run samples on different machines that are looking for different variants in different genes. And so we are requesting very specific information in order to give you what we give you. And we don't do the full genome sequence because that would be way too much data to get what we get. So yeah, so short answer is genetic conditions of that sort is not what we do, but there are many, in fact, that's what every other genetic company does. So it's not hard to get the answer.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
And is there you said that in the other class that you would be able to give us the thermoregulation gene, like there's a gene about the
yeah, UCP1, we can look that up. So either if you're in the program or send an email to Brandon, you
Okay.
know, we can get you looked at.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Okay. So I'm going to go to the Q&A box. Sarah, anything to cancer? So Sarah, sorry, you asked about, is there extra DNA markers available to me? So there's some, it's not just about markers, it's also insights. There's certain things that we know that sort of cross the line into diagnostic and health care terminology. And we're not allowed to directly hand that over to you. It's just a regulatory concern, FDA, Health Canada. And so it's, yes, there's a few extra genes, but more importantly, there's things that we know. And those things can only be spoken of if we actually intake you as a patient. And that's why we actually run a clinic, because some people need that. Most people don't need that. Most people, like, I got the report, going to become the best version of myself. Great. Then there's somebody like who we just talked to that, like, no, you need clinical support, right? And for that, we can't give you a report direct to consumer without a clinical intake. That's just regulatory. So that's the answer, Sarah. It's like more about the insights and the genes themselves. And so Jan, my reports, Jan, we spoke, I believe. Oh, surprised I was analytical, got emotional trauma, masked this. So yeah, sometimes there's, you know, again, epigenetic expression. If your body has been burdened by one particular thing, then other things can be muted in terms of to what degree you experience them. If there's been trauma, and your ADR2B gene, your noradrenaline response, is taking over your behavior and your personality, then the other things become a little muted. So your foundation is X. Now, the good news is, now that you know who you are and how you're wired, you can choose who you become. You now know that this piece of my personality profile is overactive because of what I experienced. I now understand how my biology works. And guess what? I can turn other things on by activating them, by creating the inputs that drive me. Like, I can create some reward, like a challenge for myself that will start my dopaminergic pathway going. And then I'm less reliant on that noradrenaline response. So that's the way to approach it. Megan, general logistics. So in most cases, I have accommodation letters. There's no overall summary. Does this mean I'm mid-range suboptimal? So this is where we don't agree with genetics, that there's a good or a bad, right? Context has to be considered. Is it good or bad to have a AA dopamine pathway, which means it's very hard to experience pleasure? Clinically, you would be told it's the bad version of the gene. I have AA and I believe it's one of my superpowers. I wouldn't have it any other way. But context drove that for me. So this is where the way we interpret the genome is different than the academic model of good, medium, bad. It's more like slow, medium, fast. Here's how that gene works. It's working well or it's not working so well. Now you can interpret how that applies in your outcome. If you bind dopamine well, we can start to talk about what that might mean for your mood. If you don't bind it so well, we can also talk about what that means for your mood. And now you know how to use that God-given tool that you received in your genome, as opposed to just give it a good or a bad name, right? Good or bad names are disease-centric thinking, which unfortunately is how the healthcare system is built. It's all disease backwards because it's, diagnose and treat in terms of the paradigm. It's all disease-driven, right? So we think that there's something far before disease, which is root cause. And if you think there, disease doesn't have to be part of the equation. Robin, you became nauseated from berberine. What you should look at, the particular formula you got, fillers, what was in it. Sometimes the actual, excuse me, capsule itself can be very low grade material depending where it came from. So a supplement isn't a supplement. They do vary. The same word berberine can mean 5 different things, but the biggest threat is usually fillers. And if you have a bad GSTM1 gene, or if you have a bad FUT2 gene where you don't really do well with gut enzyme activity, or if your gut is in a dysbiotic state, you may already be experiencing leaky gut or some level of inflammation, then this is going to mean more for you. So, my short answer, without having your genome in front of me, is a lot of the commercial grade stuff is not the best for you. It is full of fillers. It's not, it's also what we call pixie dusting, meaning that you buy a bottle that says berberine and you take out a pill. How much of that pill is actually berberine? Or what is the minimum amount required to put in that pill in order to be able to use the claim on the label to market the product? And you wonder why the same product has 3 different price points, right? So it's very important to buy from professional brands like, Designs for Health, Thorne, Pure Encapsulations. The DNA company makes an amazing line, to know that you're getting no filler, all killer, all the good stuff. And the capsules themselves are healthy and clean. That's where my brain goes first. If that's not the case, your gut needs a lot of work. Berberine should not have that outcome. Your gut needs work, and means what I was saying earlier about repairing the gut wall and then adding enzymes to take the load off. So, okay, it looks like we've been through this Q&A box. Were there any other questions? Oh, I see another question here, sorry. Open, answered. Oh, I think, no, I don't know where that pop-up came from. It's gone now. I see a note here that the Q&A is closed. We went about 15 minutes over, so that's fine. We want to make sure that we give you respect your time and get back to you. So there's 2 more thoughts here. Donica I wanted to ask a question, but my report is not available. Okay. So when your report becomes available, you have Brendan's email there. I would recommend, if you want an answer from me, let's make sure that we get that for you, first of all, right? So we have Brandon's email there. Send him a note. In fact, scroll even a little bit up and go to client care and send a note. And in fact, you can even start that email tonight. saying that I was on this call with Kashif and I have a question, don't have a report yet, or I will have a question. I want to keep that door open. And let's just get that email chain going tonight so that when you do get your report, that I'm available, right? So send that email tonight, client care. They will then add me to the chain and you will have that ready for you when your data comes in. Do I recommend infrared or regular sauna? So depends what outcome you're seeking. I prefer, whenever possible, to use a traditional sauna because of the detox component. The red light therapy is really mitochondrial boosting, which is awesome, right? So they both kind of do the same thing, but they're like specialists. The traditional is more of a specialist in detox, and the red light is more of a specialist in mitochondrial function. And so depending what you want. The traditional sauna, it's also okay to go to a higher heat, right? So with traditional red light, there's other considerations like the EMF levels start to increase. So when you go too high, there's a burden on the actual, transformer or whatever that thing is that creates the energy, right? With traditional sauna, you can go much higher in heat, which can give you a bigger outcome in less time. You can get up to like 180 degrees even. With infrared, you don't want to go past like 130, 140 type of thing. So those are the considerations. It's also price. It's not, if you're putting it into your home, you can buy a Therasage, drop it in. You have sauna space in here, right? You can drop it in. Traditional sauna needs to be somewhat built out. Okay, so let's see what else is here. Okay, so there you go, guys. So thank you again for spending this time with us. We wanted to make sure those people that didn't have their report on report day got a chance to ask their questions, so they did. Donica and anyone else that is still waiting for a report, email client care tonight. Let them know and say, please connect me to Kashif for my question session. And when you get your data back, so we'll make sure we get that connection now so that the email chain is open and I'll be alerted. When you get your report back, drop me your questions and we will work on things. Anyone that needs support beyond that, anyone listening here got a sense of there's certain things that are about optimization and just being the best version of myself. Great, I can take care of that. There were certain things here that were clinical in nature. That's where I would say you now have this powerful tool in your toolkit. We know who you are at a genetic level. You have a problem you're trying to solve. Do you want that to be a lingering chronic problem, which is what most of American healthcare is? I now have this. I'm now diabetic. I now have cardiovascular disease, which means you live with it. Or do you want to dig into the root cause and put some upfront effort, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 weeks of effort to truly reverse that thing and then not have to have that label of I have this anymore. So two very different ways to approach your health. Just know that's possible. Email Brandon. It's in this chat. If you just scroll up a little bit, connect with him to explore how you can work on programs. Again, it's not for everybody. If you're just here to learn about yourself and if it's a curiosity thing and be the best version and you're getting value of the report, great. If there's something clinical in nature, if it's like I feel horrible, it doesn't matter what supplement I take, my doctor stuff isn't working, I take hormones and I'm bloated, or any of these clinical things that have nuances that need tweaking, you need support. There's no straightforward answer because keep in mind, it's not just your genome. It's also your environment, it's your nutrition, and it's your lifestyle. And we cannot hand a report over to you that is personalized because we don't know what you're doing. We don't know what job you have. We don't know what relationships you have. We don't know what food you eat, right? We don't know what you're breathing. We don't know what city you live in, how much sunlight you get. All these considerations are chipping away at the problem. And eventually, if we are able to interact with you one-on-one directly, we can work with you hand in hand, chipping away at those problems, and they don't have to be there. Then all of a sudden, root cause resolved, problem no longer exists. So there you go, guys. Thanks again for joining. Again, anyone that didn't get the reports, the door is open. You got that email address. Connect with me. And I'll make sure that when you do have your data, that I'm here to answer the questions that you never got a chance to ask. Anyone that wants clinical support or wants to get more value of their genome, email Brandon. We'll leave this window open for a few minutes so you have time to record it. Thanks again, guys. Good night.